I always made a cup of tea before our Sunday video calls. It gave me something warm to hold while Gregory spoke. Or rather, while I listened and filled the silence. Chamomile, steeped exactly 3 minutes. A drizzle of honey, the same way. Henry liked it. Some habits outlast the people who inspired them. At 78, I'd grown used to the rituals of solitude. The slow pour of water from the kettle. The quiet tick of the old clock on the wall. The way light filtered through the lace curtains in the late afternoon. I set the teacup down gently, adjusted my laptop, and clicked the call icon when his name lit up on the screen. "Hi, Mom," Gregory said, his image flickering to life. He was sitting at his desk as usual, shoulders slightly hunched, the muted hum of a television in the background. He didn't smile. He never really did anymore. "Hello, dear," I said brightly, adjusting the webcam. "How's everything with you?" "Oh, you know, busy, always busy." That was Gregory's answer to everything. Work was demanding, the market was unpredictable, the kids were always on the move. He hadn't visited in nearly a year, but he called, always on time, always efficient, always emotionally elsewhere. We ran through the usual script. I told him about the new tulips blooming near the porch, how my friend Clara at the garden club had finally won that silly flower arranging contest. He made the appropriate sounds of interest. "And how are the paintings coming?" he asked, as he always did. "Oh, coming along," I replied, glancing at the half-finished watercolor on the easel in the corner. "I'm doing a series on spring. Light this month. My teacher says I've improved a lot." "That's great, Mom," he said, though his eyes stayed on another screen. I heard the faint clack of his keyboard. "Really great." I nodded, pretending not to notice. It was better that way. I asked about Monica and the kids. Jenna had just started working at a boutique downtown, he said. Caleb was between jobs again, something about a startup restructuring. They were busy too, always busy. The conversation wound down, as it always did. I told him I'd try a new recipe for banana bread this week, that I'd read an article about seasonal allergies and how they might be worse this year. "Well, I should get going," he said. "Conference call in 5. "Of course," I said, smiling even though I felt the familiar ache in my chest. "Same time next week?" "Sure thing. Take care, Mom." "You too, sweetheart." The screen froze for a moment as the connection hung. Then I heard it, faint at first, but unmistakable. Shuffling, a sigh, and then Jenna's voice, clear and sharp. "Did she fall for it?" "Hook, line, and sinker," Gregory replied, his voice now cold and casual. "God, I'm tired of pretending to care about her stupid garden club." I didn't. "Move." My hand froze on the mouse. The call hadn't ended. He'd forgotten to press the button. "She'll probably bake something again," Jenna continued with a laugh. "She always does, like it's 1955. "Let her," Monica said, her tone sharper than usual. "As long as she signs the damn trust paperwork. Once she does, we can move her into someplace smaller. That little facility near Beachmont isn't bad. Cheap, too," Caleb chimed in. "Once we get her to transfer the house into our names, she won't need all that space anyway." I felt the blood drain from my face. "She's too stupid to see what's going on," Gregory said with a dry chuckle. "Always has been. I swear if we'd pushed a little harder last year, we could have had the house already." I pressed. The laptop closed like it was burning me. The room was suddenly so quiet I could hear the tick of Henry's clock again. Loud, measured, indifferent to what had just happened. My fingers trembled as I reached for my tea. It had gone cold. I stared at nothing. A strange stillness had settled in my chest. No tears, no words. Just a profound, bone-deep silence. In those few unguarded minutes, my entire world shifted. The half-explained suggestions about streamlining finances, the polite but sudden interest in my will, the unexpected visits, the casual way Caleb had asked if my house had security cameras. For safety, he'd said. Jenna's questions about my medications, Monica's strange comments about long-term care planning. The puzzle fit together now. The picture it formed was unbearable. I don't remember much of that evening. I didn't eat. I didn't turn on the TV. I just sat at the kitchen table, watching the last of the sunlight fade from the garden. The tulips, pale yellow and orange, bowed gently in the breeze, unaware that anything had changed. That night, I blocked all their numbers, one by one. Gregory, Monica, Jenna, Caleb. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time my son had hugged me. Really hugged me, not the half-hearted one-armed gestures he offered at holidays. When had it all turned so cold? By morning, the sadness had hardened into something else. Not quite anger. Not yet. But resolve. I made coffee instead of tea. Strong. Black. Something about the bitterness steadied me. Then I opened my laptop, this time deliberately, and pulled up my financial accounts. And one by one, I started making changes. The morning, after the call, I wandered my home like it was a stranger's house. I touched the oak banister Gregory used to slide down as a boy. I stood in the doorway of my little studio, where Henry once brought me wildflowers in a mason jar and said, "Paint, what makes your heart quieter?" I leaned against the frame of the bay window where sunlight fell over the table just right in the early hours, and remembered Sunday mornings with pancakes, coffee, and the scent of Henry's aftershave in the air. This house, this life, it had all meant something once. It had been something. It had been us. Henry and I built our first home from scratch, not with hammers and nails, but with sweat and patience. He worked 2 jobs when Gregory was little, one at the lumber mill, and another hauling parts for a local mechanic on weekends. I took in tailoring work, sometimes stayed up till midnight, stitching hems and pressing collars so Gregory could have new shoes for school and Henry could have a good lunch packed every morning. We were never rich, but we were steady. Solid. The kind of love that didn't need grand gestures, just hands that always reached for each other at the end of the day. Henry used to say our home was made of more than wood and drywall. It held our memories like breath in its walls. Every creak of the floorboards, every scratch in the doorframe told a piece of our story. I believed him. Even now, in my smaller house in Port Sage, far from the old colonial where we raised Gregory, I carried pieces of that life. Hector's favorite chair, our wedding china, the little lamp with the cracked base from the flea, Market and Seaside, the painting Gregory made in 3rd grade, a lopsided sailboat under a purple sky. I'd kept it all, thinking it meant something to him too. When Henry got sick, everything slowed. Time fractured. Stage 4. Pancreatic cancer doesn't give you much room to bargain. We had less than a year from diagnosis to goodbye. Gregory had been present, at first. He came by with Monica and the kids, brought groceries, picked up prescriptions. He even mowed the lawn a few times. I remember thinking he'd stepped up, that he was becoming the man Henry always hoped he'd be. But then came the slow withdrawal, the long silences, the excuses. "Work's been insane, Mom. The kids have finals. Monica's mom fell and broke her hip. We're juggling a lot right now." I understood. I really did. Life doesn't pause just because yours does. But there were days in those last weeks when I'd sit beside Henry's bed holding his hand and feel utterly alone, like a ghost already floating through our life. After the funeral, the house felt like a mausoleum. I slept in his shirts, left his slippers by the bed. Some nights I made tea just to smell it, just to pretend he might walk in and say, "Smells like bedtime." Gregory promised to check on me every day after the funeral, and for a while he did. A quick call here, a text there. Then the calls shifted to Sundays only. The texts dried up. When I asked if the kids might come by to help me hang shelves, he said, They're teenagers, Mom. You know how it is. The Sunday dinner stopped after a few months. I had Tupperware containers in the freezer labeled with dishes I never got to serve. And then one spring, he stood in the middle of our living room, eyes scanning the photos on the wall. Our wedding, Gregory's first day of school, Christmases past, and said, "Mom, maybe it's time to downsize." I should have felt insulted. Maybe I did, somewhere deep down. But what I said was, "You might be right." I hadn't realized how tired I was until he said it. The stairs, the yard, the cold echo in every room. Henry was gone. The kids had grown. The house had become too big. But it was mine. Ours. And selling it felt like letting go of a chapter I hadn't finished reading. Still, I sold it. Gregory said it was the smart move. "The market's hot, Mom. You could get top dollar." He helped with the paperwork, arranged movers, handled the showings. I told myself he was being a good son, helpful, responsible, even when he suggested I add his name to my new checking account. "Just in case anything ever happens, Mom, we should be prepared." I told myself he was just looking out for me. I remember the first time he brought up seeing his friend in elder law. "He's really great, Mom. Helps families streamline everything, makes sure everyone's protected." I joked that I wasn't elderly just yet. Gregory laughed, but the suggestion remained. And eventually I said I'd think about it, which, in his mind, meant yes. There were other signs, small ones I brushed aside. Jenna asking about liquid assets when she was barely 20. Caleb suggesting I invest in some cryptocurrency platform he barely understood. Monica offering to take over managing my medication schedule, which, frankly, I didn't need help with. It was all subtle, just nudges, gentle prods. Kindness wrapped around control. I wanted to believe the best. You have to understand that. When someone you love begins treating you like an asset instead of a person, the last thing you want to admit is that maybe you were just never that precious to begin with. So I ignored it. Ignored the little pang in my chest when Gregory used the word liability while talking about my health insurance. I ignored the way Jenna rolled her eyes when I mentioned the art class I was taking at the community center. I ignored the barely hidden look Monica gave me when I ordered dessert on my birthday, like I shouldn't indulge at my age. Now, in the rearview mirror, I see it all. The framing, the manipulation, the gentle erosion of dignity dressed up as concern. But back then I thought I was loved. I thought they saw me the way Henry did. Strong, creative, loyal, worthy of respect, of space, not as a burden, not as a resource to be extracted. That Sunday afternoon, sitting alone in the house I'd thought of as a sanctuary, I realized the walls I had built with Henry, the life we had poured ourselves into, had been quietly disassembled, not by time, by the people I'd trusted most. It's the small moments that haunt you the most. I remember the first time Jenna came to my new house alone. She knocked with the urgency of someone in crisis, all fluttering lashes and frantic energy. I was so happy to see her, genuinely, foolishly happy. She hadn't visited in months. "Oh, Grandma," she sighed, stepping in with a hug that felt warm and desperate all at once. "You look amazing. Did you do something different with your hair?" She settled into the kitchen like she belonged there, like this visit was about love, not necessity. I made tea. She chose the floral mug, the one I always used for guests. I cherished. And I served her lemon shortbread from the tin I'd been saving for company. We talked about her classes, her dreams, how the world was unfair to young people trying to find themselves. I nodded. I listened. I remembered how she used to pick dandelions from the yard and present them to me like rare treasures. I remembered her chubby hands clutching construction paper cards that read, "Best Grandma Ever." And then, just when the tea had cooled, the ask came. I hate to bring this up, Grandma, she began, eyes lowered. But I'm in a bit of a tight spot. Rent, bills, groceries. It's just been one of those months. She said it would only take $5,000 to get her back on her feet. Just until I land something steady. She said it so sweetly, so hopefully. I could see Gregory in her face then. That same practiced charm, the same precision in delivery. A playbook, maybe. One I didn't know they all seemed to share. Of course, I wrote the check. I told myself it was what grandmothers do. That it meant something. That I was helping her, lifting her, supporting her. 2 weeks later, I saw her in town with her friends. Shopping bags from boutique stores slung over her arm, fresh acrylic nails, hair styled into a sleek new bob. That must have cost a fortune. She didn't see me across the street, but I saw everything, and something inside me, something deep and maternal, began to uncoil. It wasn't long after that when Caleb came calling. 25 and slick, he arrived in a car I didn't recognize, wearing designer sunglasses and a too-confident grin. "Grandma," he said, sliding into the armchair like a visiting executive. "I have an opportunity for you." He presented glossy printouts, graphs, forecasts, brand mock-ups. Some app about groceries or sustainability, I don't remember now. It all felt vague and overpolished. He needed a $10,000 early investor buy-in. "Imagine the legacy you could help me build," he said, leaning forward. "This isn't just about money. This is about believing in me." He even added, "You always believed in Dad when he started his career, right?" I should have hesitated. I should have said no. But I heard Henry's voice in my head, soft and proud. "Family supports each other, Helen. That's what we do." So I gave him the check. Again. Weeks later, I learned through Gregory that the business hadn't worked out. Just like that. No explanation. No apology. No mention of returning the money. The next time I saw Caleb, he was pulling into a driveway in a brand new sports car. It wasn't about bad luck. It was never about that. It was about entitlement. Around this time, Gregory's suggestions began to shift. Subtle at first. "Have you thought about long-term care?" Or, "Assisted living isn't what it used to be." One day, he casually asked if I'd updated my will since Henry passed. "It's just smart planning, Mom. You wouldn't want the state deciding where your things go." Another time, Monica commented, almost jokingly, that my home was way too big for just one person. She'd be so much safer with on-site staff nearby, Monica told Gregory, loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. Safer. As if I was some fragile antique they needed to bubble wrap and put in storage. When I mentioned these things to Elaine,
"Over lunch one Thursday, she didn't flinch. She didn't act surprised. She just set down her fork and said, 'I've been waiting for you to say something.' I blinked at her. 'What do you mean?' 'They're circling,' she said plainly.
"Like sharks, I've seen it before. Hell, I've lived it." Her voice softened. "Helen, they're not visiting because they miss you. They're showing up because you have something they want." "I'm their mother," I said weakly. "Their grandmother." She reached across the table, her hand over mine. "Exactly. And they think that means you're an easy mark." I didn't sleep much that night. I sat with old photo albums spread across my kitchen table. Baby Gregory with frosting on his cheeks. Henry holding him up to the sky like a treasure. I flipped pages, looking for proof of a love I once believed was unshakable. Evidence that what I was seeing now wasn't the whole truth, but the pictures didn't lie. What had once been joy had become a transaction. So I started writing everything down. Names, dates, amounts, every check written, every favor asked, every uncomfortable comment about money or housing or my condition. It was a strange kind of therapy, building a paper trail of my own unraveling. And as I documented, I began to see the story clearly for the first time. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the erosion of trust. It was about the subtle way they chipped away at my autonomy, masked concern as control, disguised greed as responsibility. Gregory had always been careful, never overt. He used words like efficiency, planning, support. Monica leaned on health and safety. Jenna and Caleb wore the costume of affection. All of it rehearsed, polished, persuasive. I realized, with sickening clarity, that I had been made to feel like a burden, that their kindness came with strings, and I had been tangled in them for years. Elaine once told me that love without respect is just manipulation in disguise. Now, I finally understood what she meant. I used to think heartbreak was a loud thing, all sobbing and shattered plates and slammed doors. But this heartbreak came quietly. It showed up in stillness, in the way my hand hovered over the light switch before bed, too numb to move, in how I stared at the wall above my easel for hours, brush poised, unable to paint even a single line. After I overheard that call, everything inside me went still. Not broken, not yet, just stunned. I kept replaying the words. She's too stupid to see what's going on. We just need her to sign the house over. Assisted living would be better, cheaper, and underneath it all, that laugh. That awful, easy laugh. Gregory used to laugh like that when I surprised him with chocolate chip pancakes on Saturdays. When he opened birthday gifts and found the dinosaur books he loved. That same tone, only now it was cruel, mocking, directed at me. I tried to tell myself I'd misheard, that there had to be context I was missing. But I hadn't. I knew what I'd heard, and I knew what it meant. So I opened the chest at the foot of my bed and pulled out a shoebox I hadn't touched in nearly a year. Inside were photos, letters, birthday cards, some old love notes from Henry, and beneath them, a bundle of carefully rubber-banded envelopes I hadn't wanted to look at until now. Marco's letters. We'd met at a community dance not long. After I moved to Port Sage, he was the kind of man who stood when a woman entered a room. He had an accent like poetry and called me Mrs. Helen until I insisted he didn't have to. He listened, really listened, the way no one had since Henry died. He brought me books translated from Serbian, introduced me to plum brandy I pretended to like. He sent me handwritten letters after each date, even though we lived 20 minutes apart. I hadn't felt that giddy in decades. Then Gregory found out. The calls came swiftly. You don't really know this man, Mom. There are scams. He might be after your savings. Widows are vulnerable, you know. The more I defended Marco, the more insistent Gregory became. Monica called once, feigning concern about older women being taken advantage of. I tried to brush it off, but the doubt crept in. I canceled dinner with Marco. Then another. Eventually, I sent a polite but cold message ending things. He never responded. Now, I sat on the edge of my bed holding his last letter. Inside, he'd drawn a sketch, a watercolor of a lighthouse we'd visited on a day trip. He'd written, "For you, because you are light and always notice the wind." I cried then, not because of Marco, not even because of Gregory, but because I had given up my joy for the approval of people who didn't even respect me. That night, I called Elaine. Her voice came through warm and steady, as always. "You ready now?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." The next day, Elaine drove me into town to meet her lawyer, Marcy Bell. Marcy was everything I needed her to be. Sharp, precise, and utterly unimpressed with people who try to wrap manipulation in polite smiles. Elder financial abuse often hides in plain sight, she told me after I laid out everything. especially when it comes from family. I didn't want to believe it, I admitted. No one does, she replied. But denial won't protect your savings. Action will. With her help, I did what needed to be done. I revoked Gregory's shared access to my bank accounts. I closed the joint emergency fund he'd once insisted we open, just in case. I opened new accounts under Marcy's oversight, updated all my passwords, and added security measures no one else could breach. We rewrote my will. Gregory and the grandchildren were no longer beneficiaries. I created a revocable living trust for my assets, placing Elaine as successor trustee and legal guardian of my healthcare decisions. Everything was spelled out in black and white, airtight and legally binding. If Gregory ever tried to claim I was mentally unfit or coerced, Marcy had already filed documents affirming my competence, along with a dated statement explaining why these changes were necessary. As she passed me the folder, she said, "You're not doing this to punish them, Helen. You're doing it to protect yourself." I nodded, fingers trembling. It still hurts. Of course it does. That's how you know it mattered. That weekend, I stood at my easel again. I hadn't touched a brush in weeks. But something inside me stirred. Not rage, not even grief, just a quiet insistence to begin. I painted the lighthouse from Marco's letter. The light streaming out, reaching into stormy waters. Then I added a small silhouette at the base. A woman in a blue scarf, standing tall against the wind. When I finished, I took a photo and sent it to Marco's number. I didn't expect a response. I just wanted him to know. I remembered. The next morning, he replied, "Your brush has not forgotten beauty. Would you join me for coffee?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing, "Yes, I'd like that." Something shifted after that, not all at once, but gradually. The fear that had wrapped itself around me like a shawl began to loosen. I started locking the doors for peace of mind, not paranoia. I cooked dinner again for the pleasure of it. I even sang a little under my breath while watering the porch plants. I hadn't realized how much of my life had been shaped by fear. Fear of being alone, of being forgotten, of not being useful. But the truth was, I'd always been useful. I had just let the wrong people define what that meant. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about making Gregory pay or proving anything to Jenna or Caleb. It was about reclaiming the life I had spent decades building, a life of love, dignity, and grace. It was about standing in the light again, not hiding in the shadows of guilt or obligation. It was about freedom. It was a sunny Wednesday when Gregory showed up at Haven Pines. The kind of bright, breezy day that makes you forget, for just a moment, how heavy people can make your life. I saw him before he saw me. He was walking up the main path toward the community center, clutching a bouquet of white lilies, my favorite, which meant he'd done his homework. He wore a blazer over jeans, his posture carefully casual, the practiced blend of son and salesman. Didn't panic. I didn't hide. I waited. He spotted me sitting under the pergola just outside the atrium, my sketch pad on my lap, pencil idle between my fingers. "Mom," he called, voice a little too bright, too rehearsed. "There you are." He bent down and kissed my cheek, like nothing had happened. Like months of silence and blocked numbers were just minor detours in a pleasant afternoon. "I brought these for you," he said, extending the lilies. I accepted them with a nod, placing them gently beside me. "They're lovely." He took the seat across from me, glancing around the courtyard. "This place is nice, quiet, peaceful." "It is," I said. "I like the light in the mornings." He cleared his throat. "Why'd you disappear like that?" "We've been worried. Monica's been beside herself. Jenna kept asking when she'd see you again." I looked at him then, really looked. My son, my only child. His hair going silver at the temples now, worry lines around his mouth. But his eyes, they hadn't changed. Still sharp, still calculating. You forgot to hang up the phone, I said quietly. He blinked. What? The day you called to ask for the deposit for Tyler's birthday dinner, after you thought the call ended. I heard everything. I watched the color drain from his face. His mouth opened, then closed. I heard Monica, Jenna, Caleb. I heard what you really think of me, of this house, of my savings, of your stupid mother and her garden club. He sat back in the chair like I'd pushed him. Mom, you misunderstood. We were just... Don't lie to me. My voice was calm, steady, unshakable. You said I was too stupid to see what was going on. You called me weak, manipulable. You made plans to move me out, take over the house, the retirement funds. All of it. I heard you. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed once, bitterly. So, this is what it's about, some out-of-context comments. You're going to let that destroy our family? I raised an eyebrow. Destroy? Gregory, you already did that. I just finally saw it. You're overreacting, he said, voice rising. It was a private conversation. We were frustrated, sure, but we never meant to hurt you. You're our mother. We love you. No, I said softly. You love what I can give you. There's a difference. He leaned forward, the mask slipping. Mom, this is crazy. You're isolating yourself. You're being influenced by people who don't know what's best for you. People like Marcy, Elaine, people who actually respect me. He ignored that. We've been family your whole life. You can't just throw that away because of one bad moment. I looked at him, heart aching in a way that no legal document or financial betrayal could ever explain. I'm not throwing it away, Gregory. I'm choosing peace. And peace means boundaries. He scoffed. So what, you just cut us off? No calls? No visits? Nothing? I shook my head. Not unless it's real. If you want a relationship with me, it will be on my terms. No more financial requests. No more manipulation. No more pretending to care when you just want control. He was quiet. I don't need your money, I added. I don't need your permission. I don't need to be managed or placated or guilted. What I need is respect. And if you can't offer that, then no. We don't have a relationship. He stood up suddenly. The chair scraped loudly against the stone patio. You're making a huge mistake. I didn't flinch. Then let it be mine. He looked down at me, jaw clenched. We're your family, Mom. You owe us something. And there it was, the real truth. Not wrapped in flowers, not softened by guilt, just naked entitlement. I stood, slower than him, but taller somehow. I don't owe you anything, Gregory. I gave you a childhood, a home, love, support. That was the gift. That was the legacy. What you do with it is your choice. But I will not let you keep draining what's left of me, just because you think you're entitled to the pieces. He didn't speak again, just stared at me, eyes full of something I couldn't name. Rage, disbelief, maybe even grief. Then, he turned and walked away, lilies forgotten on the bench beside me. I sat back down. My hands were shaking, just a little. My throat ached with unshed tears. But I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I picked up my sketch pad. I turned to a fresh page, and I began to draw the outline of a garden, one free of weeds, ready to bloom. The first morning after Gregory left, I opened the curtains before dawn. My little apartment at Haven Pines faces east. Henry would have loved that. He always said the best kind of morning light was the kind that arrived quietly, slipping in like a secret, illuminating without announcement. That's exactly what it did, stretching long fingers of pale gold across my rug and over the half-painted canvas on the easel. It was the lighthouse again, the one Marco had painted for me in a letter, long ago. I'd started over, this time, from memory but with a twist. A garden bloomed at the base of the cliffs now, wisteria tangled in the stones. A tiny figure in a scarf stood on the shore, this time facing the light. I lifted my brush and added another stroke. It was the first time in years I didn't second-guess a color. I hung my paintings in every room of my new place, not because they were masterpieces, but because they were mine. A landscape over the fireplace, a still life in the kitchen, a moody portrait of a willow tree in the bedroom, its branches trailing into a pond. Each one told a little piece of my story, a moment reclaimed, a thought finally expressed. There was no one to scoff at the colors, no one to say I should sell them or digitize them or invest the time more strategically. Just the silence of this space and the soft approval of my own company. In the afternoons, I started volunteering at the community center, just a couple days a week at... First, they asked if I'd be interested in teaching an art workshop for beginners. I laughed when they asked. I'm not a teacher, I said. But they said, you don't have to be. Just share what you love. So I did. We started with watercolors. 10 students, all retirees, lined up with their brushes and blank pages, timid and curious. I taught them what I knew, that there's beauty in imperfection, that water always finds its own shape, that sometimes the best thing you can do is let the paint wander and not try to fix it. And somehow, while teaching that, I began to believe it myself. Elaine came by every Thursday, just like she promised she would. She always brought a pastry box from Russo's, the little bakery near the pier with the flakiest turnovers I've ever tasted, and a new piece of gossip from the senior book club, where apparently someone named Frank had accidentally shown up with 2 different women to 2 different readings. We'd laugh until we couldn't breathe. Those afternoons filled my home with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Warmth. Not the kind that comes from obligation or scripted phone calls, but real warmth. The kind that stays in your bones after the door closes behind your last guest. Elaine never asked for anything. She didn't make jokes about inheritance or hint about medications. She just showed up, week after week, with her sharp tongue and sharp mind and unyielding love, my big sister, my ballast, my witness. Then one Saturday, Marco returned. It wasn't dramatic, no speech, no flowers, no big apology needed. Just him, waiting outside the art center after class, holding a takeout cup of coffee and wearing that same wool coat I always teased him about. I heard you were back, he said. I wasn't gone, I replied, stepping into the sunlight. We walked to the bench near the duck pond, and he told me he'd never stopped hoping I'd call. I told him I was sorry, that I'd let fear and pressure make choices for me. He waved a hand. Life is not a straight road, he said. Sometimes it circles until you're ready to see what's in front of you. We started slow, coffee once a week, a walk through the sculpture park, a quiet dinner at the Serbian cafe near the marina. No pressure, just space. He asked about my new paintings. I asked about his family in Novi Sad. We shared silences that didn't need to be filled. One night, he looked at me and said, "You're different now. Not harder, just lighter." And I realized he was right. The weight I'd been carrying, for years, the guilt, the fear, the constant ache of being not enough, had finally started to lift. I still thought of Gregory sometimes. Of course I did. It's impossible to erase a lifetime of motherhood with a few legal filings and a blocked number. There were moments, especially in the evenings when the TV murmured low and the sky turned pink, when I'd remember holding his tiny hand at the zoo, or the time he'd cried on his first day of kindergarten and clung to my skirt. Those memories still lived inside me. I didn't try to banish them. I let them be what they were. Good things, honest things. But I no longer used them to excuse the man he became. Love does not require you to be blind. It does not demand that you remain available to abuse just because the hands doing the damage once reached for yours in innocence. At Haven Pines, they held a spring art exhibition. Residents could submit any piece they liked. I entered 2 paintings, the lighthouse, and a portrait of Elaine with her crooked smile and a raspberry Danish in one hand. Both sold. Not for much, but enough to make me smile when the check came. I treated myself to a new set of brushes. The expensive kind I always told myself were a luxury, and I began a new painting the next morning. A self-portrait, not a literal one, not me standing in a mirror, but something symbolic. A woman walking through an open gate, head lifted, a field blooming before her. In the distance, a house, small but glowing with warm yellow light. Freedom, rendered in watercolor. I thought I would feel bitter, angry, hollowed out by what I'd lost. Instead, I felt awake. I was 78, and for the first time in decades, I was living without someone else's expectations shaping my every step. I wasn't a checkbook. I wasn't a storage locker for other people's disappointments. I wasn't a project to be managed. I was Helen Bishop, artist, sister, friend, survivor. And each morning, as the light spilled across my floor and brushed my canvas with gold, I whispered the same quiet prayer. Let today be mine, only mine. And it was. 6 months had passed since I stepped fully into this new life. 6 full months of quiet mornings, art classes, and slow, healing days. The garden at Haven Pines had transformed with the season. What was once winter bare and brittle now brimmed with color. Tulips nodding their bright heads, lavender edging the walkways, hummingbirds flitting from blossom to blossom like tiny streaks of joy. I'd just finished a landscape painting of it. A wide canvas meant for the community hall, rich with purples, greens, and bursts of coral pink. The kind of garden Henry would have admired from a lawn chair with a cold glass of lemonade in hand, humming along to a Sinatra tune. The painting was still drying when I walked back into my apartment and found the envelope. No return address. Jenna's handwriting, unmistakable. That curly looped G she used to inscribe on her birthday cards to me, back when she was still small and sweet and thought I was magic. I stared at it for a moment, heart steady now, not racing like it once would have. Then I opened it. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even regret. Just another request, wrapped in syrup and paper. I know things have been difficult, but I was hoping you might reconsider. I need help with tuition again. I promise this is the last time. I didn't finish the letter. I folded it once, then again, walked calmly to the fireplace, and set it alight. The paper curled, blackened, and vanished, taking with it the last thread tethering me to obligation. I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief. After that, I went out, onto my balcony. The light was softening into late afternoon, brushing across the treetops with that warm, amber glow I loved so much. Marco would arrive soon. We were planning to try a new little bistro by the marina. Nothing fancy, just a place with good mussels and better stories. He always had one. His voice was like a velvet thread winding through history and loss and laughter. He never pushed, never asked for anything but time. He understood quiet company, the kind that heals instead of hollows. Elaine had been by, earlier that morning. She brought cherry danishes and a scandalous update about someone in her building eloping with the piano instructor. We laughed. God, how we laughed. My sister's laugh, so brassy and unapologetic, had become a kind of anthem in this new chapter of my life. These were my people now. Not because we shared blood or names, but because they offered me presence, kindness, choice. That was the most radical part of it all, realizing that love should feel like freedom, not currency. Sometimes I still thought about Gregory, not with rage, not even with pain, just with clarity. He'd made his choices. I'd made mine. He hadn't reached out again since the last confrontation. Not a call, not a visit. Natalie sent a cold email weeks ago asking for a status update, as if I were a spreadsheet she'd misplaced. I ignored it. Caleb had tried to add me on social media under a fake name. I blocked the request. Even Jenna's letter, manipulative as it was, felt like the final ripple of a wave that had long since passed. They didn't know me anymore. Not truly. They knew the version they'd crafted. The doting, convenient, quiet Helen who handed over checks and smiled through dismissals. That woman was gone. Or rather, that woman had never existed. Not really. She was a role I'd auditioned for out of love and fear and hope, and finally outgrown. The art studio at Haven Pines had just announced a fall showcase. I was submitting 3 pieces: the Haven Garden, the Lighthouse, and the portrait of Elaine. One of the staff asked me the title of the 3rd piece. I smiled. Legacy, I said. Not because Elaine would leave behind riches or a name carved into stone, but because she had taught me what legacy really meant. Legacy isn't what we leave in our will. It's what we protect while we're still alive. I stepped back inside and looked around the apartment. My apartment, not a stopgap, not a demotion, a home. The willow painting hung near the door now. The light caught the water beneath its branches, in just the right way around 5:30 p.m. The kettle whistled on the stove. Earl Grey, my evening cup. As I poured the water, I caught sight of my reflection in the kitchen window. Silver hair pulled back, eyes soft but steady. Wrinkles, more of them than last year. But I didn't mind. They were stories carved in time. I wasn't hiding anymore. Not from the truth. Not from my loneliness. Not even from love. Family, I had learned, is not defined by blood or titles, or guilt-laced traditions. It's the people who choose you, and whom you choose in return. It's the ones who show up when there's nothing to gain. Who see your worth not in what you give, but in who you are. Elaine. Marco. The students in my art class who now hug me after each lesson. They were my family now. And that wasn't sad. It was sacred. As the sky deepened outside, I returned to my studio corner. A blank canvas waited on the easel. I sat before it, brush in hand, letting the quiet rise around me like a curtain. What would I paint next? Maybe a garden in winter, not barren but resting. Maybe a sunrise over the sea. Maybe a woman standing alone, strong in silhouette, casting her own light. Whatever it was, it would be mine. Because at 78, I was no longer someone else's background. I was the artist, the subject, the story, and this canvas? It was all my own.